And the question that I've always been faced with throughout my entire career, especially from people who believe in government, is to what extent has our prosperity been the result of our growth in government, and to what extent has it hindered our growth in government? And that was a question that I could not find a good answer to, and so I ended up doing the research. I ended up going from 1900 to 2015, 115 years, looking at economic data and making sure they were all consistent on a whole lot of issues. And what I found is that a key figure that dictated our living standards, this key figure was the amount of earnings of a full-time worker after taxes. That went up 213% over that 115-year period. 1% a year. That's tremendous. That's the best in the world in terms of creating prosperity, certainly for any major country. And yet, we had this huge increase in government spending, taxes, regulation. And that's a move away from classical principles. So what I did next is I looked at each year of those 215 years and figured out whether we were moving either toward classical principles by keeping taxes low or cutting them, or cutting government spending and containing it, or were we doing the opposite, moving away from them? And what I found was that there were only 50 years, 50 years, in that 115-year period when our policies were moving clearly in the direction of these classical economic principles. But during those 50 years, almost all the increase in living standards in this country occurred. 87% of the increase in living standards. The remainder came in 13 years from 1940 to 1953, when we had 2 wars and we moved back and forth in terms of government controls and away from them. What was left were 52 years where they were clearly moving away from classical economic principles. What happened in those 52 years? There was 0 increase in workers' real take-home pay. In other words, in our country, with all our capital, all our education, all our great resources, all our knowledge, when we pursued policies that we find in just about every underdeveloped country in the world, we behaved as an underdeveloped country. There was no progress. So what's happened since 2015, since I published all this in my book? Well, we've had 2 additional cycles. We had a cycle from 2015 to 2019, where we moved back in the direction of classical principles for the 6th time. It's a relatively short cycle. But during that period, worker incomes went up 5%, a little more than 1% a year. Great period. Then what happened starting in 2020? COVID. COVID hit, government came in, huge increase in government spending, massive increases in 2020. And then with the change in administration, all new government programs over the course of the next 3.5 years. And what happened to earnings? The earnings of a typical worker went down 6%. They're actually lower today than they were in 2015. The after-tax earnings of a full-time worker. Again, what happened throughout history has been repeated in the current cycle.